been into an argument, and right in the middle of the argument you figured out that you were wrong, but you wouldn't change your mind? You kept trying to defend something that was not defensible? Well, I know I certainly have. When I was married, I would argue with my wife sometimes, and I can remember during the conversation, I would figure out, hey, she's got the right, what's going on? And I'm not right. But do you think that I would stop and I would change and let her know that I was wrong or apologize? Well, if you think that, you're wrong, because I was sure going to be right. Do you think whenever, sometimes in your life, you've had somebody that you've disagreed with, and you decide that you're wrong, and you think you need to apologize, and you cannot even figure out what it is you're going to apologize for? I can remember sometimes when I would argue with my wife, and we wouldn't even know 5 minutes later what it was that we were arguing about. Well, we had the same thing in this family of Jacob. Jacob's family, they didn't like Jacob's favorite son. They didn't like him at all. His name was Joseph, and they did him wrong. They did him wrong, and then they put him into a pit, a cistern, to leave him to die, because his dad preferred him to them. Then they thought, well, best thing, no need to leave him here and not get anything. Here comes some Ishmaelites by, and they're going to Egypt. Let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites. And so they did. So now they've come across where now they have to come to him, and they're going to try and be forgiven, but they're not going to say that they're wrong. It's hard to do. It's a hard thing to say, those 3 or 4 little words, I am wrong. Okay, let's see where they were wrong and see what happens in the very last chapter of Genesis. When we finish this chapter, that's it for the Genesis. Then we go to the next book, which is going to be Exodus, and it's going to be interesting also. Let's go now, open your Bibles to chapter 50, verse 1. And I'm going to read. And this is about Jacob's funeral. He's on his last legs now. Verse 1 says, let's see, in chapter 49, he passes away, He passes away. Now in chapter 50, we're going to see what happens after he passes away. Verse 1, Joseph flung himself upon his father and wept over him as he kissed him. Then Joseph ordered the physicians in his service to embalm the father, and when the physicians embalmed Israel, or Jacob he's also called, they spent 40 days at it, for that is the full period of embalming, and the Egyptians mourned over him for 70 days. And when the period for mourning was over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's household, If you please, appeal to Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, I am dying. Bury me in my grave that I have prepared for myself in the land of Canaan. Now that's the land that we're supposed to be the land of milk and honey that is coming up, and it is going to be the land that he's going to be there with his daddy Isaac and his grandpa Abraham, and Abraham bought that land for them, just for them, to have the burial plots. Verse 4, when the period of mourning was over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's household. If you please, appeal to Pharaoh, saying, now why wouldn't he go to Pharaoh himself? He's got it made. He's special. He's the number 2 man, but he doesn't talk to Pharaoh. He talks to his attendants and tells, you go talk to Pharaoh. And say, my father made me swear, I'm dying. Bury me in my grave that I have prepared for myself in the land of Canaan. That's the land, the promised land. And that's where he should be buried with his family. So now let me go to bury my father, then I will come back. He's going to go bury him up in Canaan and then come back because they all live in Egypt right now. And they got it really good down there. They don't want to go back to Canaan yet, I don't think, because they got the best of the best. Verse 6, Pharaoh replied, go and bury your father as he made you promise on an oath. You remember he made him to make an oath. He put his hand under his dad's leg, under his thigh, and swore. And that's the way we say, I cross my heart and hope to die, only we don't hope to die. But this one is, when they swear, they put their hand under their father's thigh. Verse 7, so Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all of Pharaoh's officials who were senior members of the household of all, as well as Joseph's whole household, his brothers and his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in the region of Goshen. Goshen is the very fertile land where they have the best of the best. Verse 9 says, chariots too, and horsemen went up with them. It was a very imposing retinue. Verse 10, when they arrived at Goren Hadad, which is beyond the Jordan, they held there a very great and solemn memorial service, and Joseph observed 7 days of mourning for his father. They're burying him beyond the Jordan, and that is not Canaan. So the author here has made a slip up, and there are errors in our Bible, and this I think is one of them, because he's supposed to be buried in Canaan, but they say beyond the Jordan. That's in verse 10. Verse 11 says, when the Canaanites who had inhabited the land saw that the mourning of Goren Hadad, they said, this is a solemn funeral on the part of the Egyptians. That is why the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Beyond the Jordan means it's out of the way. It's not out of Canaan. But it said in that first part of that verse, when the Canaanites who inhabited the land saw this. So if the inhabitants of Canaan are seeing it, it's going to be in Canaan. But he says on the other side of the Jordan, which is not Canaan. Now, verse 12 is going to be the priestly source, and he's going to correct it. He's going to say, thus Jacob's sons did for him as he had instructed them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, facing on Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought for a burial ground from Ephron the Hittite. That was way back there in chapter 30, something like that, where Abraham is, or but before that even, where Abraham was buying the plot of land to bury his spouse. Verse 14. After Joseph had buried his father, he returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to the burial of his father. Now we're going to change to a completely different topic. The plea for forgiveness. And this is going to be from the writer from the north. And it's going to be not the priest anymore. Verse 15 says, now here they are. That's like what I was thinking of at the beginning. Have you ever been into an argument and you won't admit you're wrong, so you try to get whatever way you can to work out of it, even if you try. Verse 15 says, now that their father was dead, Joseph's brother became fearful and thought, suppose Joseph had been nursing a grudge against us, and now most certainly will pay us back in full for all the wrong we did to him. They already know that he's not going to pay them, not going to try and make them have a difficult time. He's already straightened it out with them, and that was in the source in the south. It was what we call the J source, and this is from the north. So they're scared. They weren't scared back in the other source. Verse 16. So they sent to Joseph and said, Before your father died, he gave us these instructions. Now here they're lying, and we lie sometimes to get out of it. He gave us these instructions. Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive the criminal wrongdoings of your brothers who treated you harmfully. So now please forgive the crime that we, the servants of the God of your father, committed. And when they said this to him, Joseph broke into tears. Joseph has already forgiven them. They know that there's not any hard feelings, but that was a different writer. Verse 18. They're going to really lay it on thick. Then his brothers also proceeded to fling themselves down before him and said, we are your slaves. That's quite a change from before, from being the ones that were going to kill him and the ones that then later that needed him for food, and now they're going to be his slaves. Verse 19. But Joseph replied to them, do not fear. Can I take the place of God? Now what's he mean here? Can I take the place of God? The next verse is going to answer that for us. Verse 20 says, even though you meant harm to me, God meant it for good to achieve this present end, the survival of many people. Now, if they had not done that, if they had not sold him into Egypt, they probably would have starved because they ran out of food, and Egypt's the place that had the food, and Joseph's the one that's in charge of the food. So he's saying, this was God's plan. It's not anything I've done. I'm not God. That's what he's referring to back there. Can I take the place of God? Can I take credit for this? No, this is God's plan. God knew what was going on, and he's doing this so that his family won't starve. Verse 21 says, so now do not fear. I will provide for you and for your children. He's already done that. He's already put them in the land of Goshen. By thus speaking kindly to them, he reassured them. He saw Ephraim's children to the third generation, and the children of Manasseh's son Machir they were also born on Joseph's knees. Now Joseph is going to pass away. This is verse 24. Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die. God will surely take care of you and lead you from this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now, when did he do that? He did it back there in chapter 50 of the 24. That's right now. But he's going to reinforce this, or we're going to hear it about again when we get to Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. And if you want to, you can write chapter 3, verse 8. But I'm going to read it to you. This is now after they've come back into the land of Canaan. We have this. Therefore, I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them up from the land and into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So they're telling him now, we're hearing in Exodus that God says that I took you out of there. Now, right here is where it says they're going to take you out of here. This is in Genesis. Now, if that got confusing, in Genesis, he says, I'm going to go back there to the land. But the next book is Exodus, and they're looking back and they say, God says, I told you I was going to take you out of there. And he has now. Verse 29, verse 25. Then putting the sons of Israel under oath, he promised, what God thus takes care of you, you must bring my bones up from this place. That's verse 25. It's going to be over 200 years before his bones get taken up there. And that's what we're going to read about in Exodus 13, chapter 13, verse 19. And Moses is going to be the one that brings them back. And in Exodus chapter 13, verse 19, it says this, Moses also took Joseph's bones. So this is 200 years later or more. With him, for Joseph had made the Israelites take a solemn oath, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you must bring my bones up with you from here. So that's talking in the next book in Exodus, where he's taking the bones up there, and he's saying back here to chapter 2, verse 25 says, you're going to take my bones. And verse 26 says, Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed and laid to rest in a coffin in Egypt. He was not buried. He was in a coffin. He's going to stay there. They're not going to bury him. Later in Exodus, Moses is going to take his bones and he's going to take them up to Canaan. And so in this verse it says, also we think, was ever there a man like Joseph? Even his dead body was provided for. That's going to be coming in Exodus. There never was a man like Joseph before. Even his body was taken care of. Even they're going to take him from Egypt and take him to Canaan. Well, that is the end of, now we've gone through. Started with Adam, went to Noah, went to Abraham, went to Isaac, went to Joseph, went to Isaac, went to Jacob. Now Joseph is gone, and they're still settled in Egypt, and they are happy. They've got everything made. They're not even in their promised land, but they probably want to stay there. But the tide is going to change. This Pharaoh is going to pass away. The next Pharaoh is not going to remember that Joseph was a great person, and it's going to get bad for the Israelites. God bless you. Peace be with you, and have a wonderful week. See you next week.